Hey guys, Bethany here, All Things Life and Fitness. Today is the very last video in our law enforcement series, and we're going to talk about life in law enforcement.
Yeah, and stick around to the end of this video because I think the last segment about mental health for officers is by far the most important. If you know an officer, it's definitely the most important part.
Yep. So do me a favor and hit the like button right now and then stick around to the end because you don't want to miss the last part. So in this video, I feel like we could talk about this topic forever and it could drag on and on. So we're going to just talk about a few key topics that we think are important about this topic and kind of how to balance some things in just life and law enforcement. So starting off, let's talk about the life-work balance.
Yeah, so the way I think about work-life balance before we get to the family, because that's different, is do you as an officer have an identity outside of the police department? And I think that it was established for me because I went into law enforcement a little bit later, but I'm not police officer through and through. I don't leave with my undercover Instagram account. I don't check my emails. I don't do anything police related outside of the police department except for carry my gun and badge, but that's for more family self-defense than it is for, oh, I'm going to stop a crime.
Yeah, so one of the things I think John had an identity outside of being a police officer before going into law enforcement. So he works as a police officer. You are not only a police officer. You're so many other things. You're a dad. You have hobbies. You have other interests outside of just going to work and then getting off work and still being in work mode.
Yeah, my whole life is not centered around, I got to catch bad guys. When I'm there, I want to do a good job. But, my life is centered my faith in Christ and raising good family and being a good father and learning how to be the best disc golfer that I can and all those types of things. So I have hobbies and a life and friends that aren't associated to the police department for that just complete work-life balance. Because if I was fully consumed and I have friends that are in there that we could bring into this room and talk about it, and it's just not healthy. The second thing we talk about is family life. Do we do a good job? Do I?
I think so.
Yeah.
Let's talk about family life a little bit. What are some things that you think that are helpful just in the family life aspect of the job?
Well, I think one for me is, which is weird, is the commute, the 40-minute separation to help, like what I just said, leave police at police and leave work and life like when I come home. But what do you think is most important? Because I don't know. I don't know what you're trying to get out of me. I'm clueless.
I think that commute is great. You can decompress and kind of transition out of that work mode back into like, okay, I'm going home to my family. One of the things that we've kind of done from early on is when he gets home, I just say, hey, how was work? And early on, I would ask more detailed questions, but now he just kind of knows and he gives me a summary of his night or his day. And then I am able to know how his day went or his night. And if he had a hard call or a really busy night or a stressful night, I'm able to give him a little more grace when he might be possibly moody or on edge that day versus being like, why aren't you helping? Why aren't you? Or why are you being so moody? He's never moody.
Keyword there,
ever.
Possibly, because it's most likely not going to happen.
Yeah, totally, possibly in the rare occasion that it ever happens. But
Never.
I'm just saying, I'm able to give him a little grace versus, nagging him or pressing further. I can kind of go, okay, he had a rough night. He needs a little space.
So we just have to communicate.
Communication.
Which is what you need to work on. Because I am an excellent communicator.
So good. He'll do a whole video on it.
I think for work life, it's police work. And so just like all other first responders, we're open 24/7. So for the family to be adaptable to the schedule, because we have to work on Christmas, we have to work on Thanksgiving, we have to work when there's T-ball games going on, and we also get called in for court and special like overtime and SWAT call outs. And so
it's training.
So it's just to be adaptable to the schedule, I think is a big family life issue that you don't really know if you're not in it, because some people are married to their jobs. And like when we owned our own family restaurant, that was almost worse, I think.
100%.
Yeah. So there's some of you that work way more than we do as police officers, but we can't take a break, just like all other first responders.
Yeah, and I think this is super important for the spouse because the officer knows going into the job that what the schedule is going to be like or has a better idea. But as a spouse, it's our job to be adaptable and flexible with that. Kids are very adaptable and flexible. Holidays are what you make it. The kids know that dad sleeps in the day and works nights, and that's normal for them. They don't know any different. As long as you make it that normal and be flexible, they will be flexible right along with you.
I also think for family life is also community life, and you have that with a bunch of the women at the department, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
does that help you or?
Yes. So I've become really close with some of the women at the police department. They're like very close friends. And I think we're so close because we share the common uh when something crazy goes down, there were recent protests and you guys were all out at it, and we know exactly what each other is going through. Where my other friends who their husband are not in law enforcement, they can't understand. They can try to be there for you, but they just don't know what it's like. So having that community with other people who know what you're going through is really important. All right. So another topic I want to talk about is the societal pressures of just kind of how you deal with that.
Yeah, so it's weird. It's tough for me and it's not tough, right? So as a police officer, I try to hear those things and then also understand I have absolutely no control over them. And so just block them out because I'm not going to worry. And just like the rest of my life, if it's something I can't control, worrying about it is only going to make it worse. Like, what's the point? It's not going to make anything better. I'm aware of what's going on in society and I'm aware of what's in the media. And I hear those things, but at the same time, I know that I personally have no control over those things. So I try not to worry about them. Just like anything else in my life, what's worrying going to do? And sometimes that's hard because we're human, but worrying's literally going to make my life worse and not make anything better. So I try to hear those things and keep them in the back of my mind when I'm going to certain calls or involved in certain situations. But at the same time, I try not to let them affect my daily life because there's nothing I can do about it. I know that I'm doing things right. I'm doing things ethically. I'm doing things morally. And I know that that's the case for every officer I've ever come in contact with. I don't know any bad officer at our department. I don't. And so it doesn't make sense to me that society thinks that we're all bad or anything like that. I know the huge majority of people support us. So I just don't worry about that. And I go about my job as I normally would and try to do it right and try to treat people the right way and just, arrest bad guys when I need to.
Yeah, I think that's super important. A lot of people ask, like, how do you deal at home with or watching the news? First of all, I stopped watching the news. And second, like John said, worrying about it isn't going to change anything. I cannot control. So if I lay in bed awake all night, and yes, I do have sleepless nights occasionally because I am human, but laying in bed all night stressing over his safety is not going to keep him safe. So I don't do it because I need to be able to get a good night's sleep, be the best mom that I can be, and be a good wife for when he comes home.
Yeah, be a good wife.
Last topic we're going to cover. You said that mental health is like one of the most important topics, and I agree with you. I think it is. Talk a little on that.
Yeah, so I think not just police, but first responders in general. I mean, we go to things and see things that most people don't see, or like you see once in your lifetime. Like if you think about, have you ever rolled up on a really bad car crash and seen like blood and bones and stuff? Like I have. I've been there when this dude dropped a chainsaw and hit his leg and cut his thigh like wide open, right? I was the first one there when an 8-month-old baby died. Like those things stink. I've seen more dead people than I want to see. Like you also go to where wives are getting beat. Like you just see the worst side of people all the time. You're always meeting people at their basically like on their worst day. If you think about if you've ever called the police or run into the police, it's always for something bad that's happening. And it's not just police, it's all first responders run into this. So you see that over and over and over, and people compartmentalize it and treat it differently. There's also, like we talked about, the copy cops, as I call them, that cannot turn it off. They just always go, 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 and they get burnt out. They get, assigned to like the sex crimes, and they have to deal with just like video after video and case after case of like children being molested and people dying, like all this crazy stuff that normal people might not even know exists. Or I mean, they know it exists, but it's kind of like on the back burner, where we see it all the time. And so that affects people and affects people a lot differently. For me, I think I deal with it pretty well. We talk about it, and I just, like we talked about, my identity's, in Christ, and the way I think and with a Christian worldview. I just think I see things a little bit differently than some people. But there are officers that are hurting. There are, and firefighters and first, nurses and doctors, but they're first responders. Who did I miss? AMR, what else? First responders, so they don't get mad at me. Yeah. So
all of the first responders,
yeah,
nurses.
But there's first responders that are hurting, and they're covering it up with drinking, like heavily. Every single night they have to drink to go to sleep. They struggle with being able to communicate. Their family life falls apart. I've been there when an officer, it wasn't for our department, but when an officer committed suicide, so it's just it's a very tough job, and it's a very tough topic for most officers to talk about and most first responders. But the reality is, if you know someone, or you're married to someone, or you are someone that's struggling or hurting or need that help, you have to ask. You have to step up. There's no shame in it at all. It could save your life, or you doing that could save the life of somebody else, whether you're a friend, a spouse or somebody. But, they're first responders need that extra support and help. And it's not all of them by any means, but there are, you talked about, I don't know what it was, officer suicide rate, and I have no idea what it is, but I do know that officers commit suicide. Yeah.
It's high.
So that's my biggest thing, that if you're not aware of it, you don't talk about it, you're not open about it, you're not open to therapy for healing, and you're not open to those types of things, like, it can totally ruin the rest of your life. And so I just think it's a big topic that gets I think it's better now, at least at our department, as far as being talked about and having resources. But, like, you're like alpha dudes and males, and like, you want to, like, you're macho and like, I don't need help and I can do this on my own, when in reality, like, you're broken inside and you need help. So I've had a few friends that have gone through some pretty serious stuff, mentally, and it's really sad and it hurts, but it's good to see them come out on the other side when they get help, as opposed to try to go through it on their own. So
yeah, and I think that we need to normalize the idea of therapy or seeking help or talking about it, because I do think, like, especially for men, you have to be macho and you have to be strong, and that's not the case at all. I tell people, I'm like, think of therapy as like deodorant. It's a prevention, and that's very lighthearted, but it's really important, and like John said, it's very prevalent. And so if you know someone, take it serious and make sure they're okay.
Yeah, they're not fun conversations to have, and they're hard, but it's like, you're talking about the rest of their life. And I have a couple friends that could probably come on here and talk about it, but there's just, somebody just needs to make that first step, whether it's you as the officer or first responder saying, hey, I need help, or, as a spouse or a friend, where like, hey man, what's going on? I've noticed that you've had a bottle of bourbon every night for the last 42 days. Like, what's going on? There's something wrong here, So I just think it's very important, and don't be afraid to make that step, because you might save somebody's life.
Yeah. Check in with your friends, and you can always direct message John. We can help you with getting resources too.
Yeah, I am not a psychologist, so
no.
Don't.
We can point you in the right direction.
That was the last video of the series, but we are going to do one more that's just Q&A. So we don't really know what that video is going to be about yet. We've been putting together the questions. If you have any specific about anything law enforcement, whether we talked about it or not, put it in the comments below, or message to Bethany, or message it to me, and we'll put it, if it's a good one, we'll answer it. If it's a bad one, maybe we'll just like message you back.
Maybe we'll answer it too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We really enjoyed this series. We have that last video, the question and answer. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share these videos with a friend.
Did you hear that? She said our channel.
My channel.
Bye. If I turned my hat backwards, would people notice when it went from one clip to the next?